Of a former president admits on the stand today to stealing from the Trump Organization. Plus, sending condolences to Iran. Do they need well wishes? And where lawmakers now say the 10 Commandments must be displayed. Come on in. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. All right, here we go, hanging out with us today. Chris Steyerwalt, host of The Hill Sunday, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute as well. Kelly Meyer, NewsNation Washington correspondent. Jonathan Cott is the former senior advisor to Senator Joe Manchin. Ashley Davis, George W. Bush White House official. And Mick Mulvaney, NewsNation contributor and former Trump White House chief of staff, joining us throughout the show. Hello, Mick. Hello to you all. Happy Monday. It is the start of a new week. And there could be a lot of news coming up here, especially on this show. Hot Mic with Mick. We're going to get to Mick in a second. You're going to have a breakdown on sort of a new play among Republicans, what some in this town are doing. Tim Burchett, I'm going to pepper you about your old boss.
Can't wait.
Can't wait for that. I'm sure you are. But first, let's start with the big news out of New York today. Michael Cohen saying that he stole tens of thousands of dollars from the Trump Organization. Does this sway sort of the public opinion, the public sentiment at all in any way? Because we could get a verdict next week here.
Michael Cohen's credibility is his credibility as a shady operator.
Yeah.
Right? So what Michael Cohen has tried to establish in this trial and what he has tried to publicly establish is that he was a bad person who did bad things, and he has seen the light, and he is trying to do the right things now. By inculpating himself here, by saying that he did this, I suppose it probably adds to the credibility for a guy who now is exposed to potential prison time, serious additional prison time for having said it. I guess that probably adds to his credibility.
Adds to it. All right. Jesse Weber, NewsNation legal contributor, come on in. Mulvaney, I want to get some of your thoughts here as well. But Jesse, let's start with you. I mean, how is the star witness also seemingly the weakest link in this case? I mean, he admitted today to stealing money from the organization. What does he have legal exposure to? What's going on here?
First of all, does anybody else feel like this is an SNL skit? Like they put up a witness, the witness lies, steals from the defendant, says he has a financial interest in the verdict. We can't forget that came out today. Look, none of this is a surprise. What do I mean by that? I mean, we all knew that Michael Cohen was going to be the star witness and the most problematic witness in this prosecution. Now, in cases all across the country, you don't pick and choose your witnesses. Sometimes they're jailhouse informants. Sometimes they're Michael Cohen. It does bring a question of whether or not this should be prosecuted if a large part of this case is relying on Michael Cohen. Now, having said that,
should it?
You might be able to put that inside and say, is everything he's saying about the facts of this case, the elements of this case, backed up by everything else they already heard? The witnesses, the documents. We'll wait and see, but you can't get a more problematic witness than Michael Cohen in this case.
Should it be prosecuted? Like if you were to just start, let's just put it there. Should it be prosecuted based off of what you heard?
It probably won't be. There is a 2 to 5 year statute of limitations in New York for grand larceny. So assuming this happened in 2017, it wouldn't work. But even putting that aside, what did we learn? He met with prosecutors 20 times this year. The likelihood that they're going to prosecute him and they don't know about this, there's no way they're going to prosecute Michael Cohen for that. No.
What are you laughing about, Mulvaney?
The whole thing. I mean, Michael Cohen, it's right. It is an SNL skit, right? You asked an interesting question, I think, which is the impact. How would the public react to this? But that's not the important question. The important question is, how is the jury going to react to this? And Steyerwalt's right. Steyerwalt's right. Look, he's coming out saying, I'm a bad guy. I'm turning over a new leaf. If he can sell that, then yeah, maybe he's got some credibility. But goodness gracious, every time we turn around, this guy loses credibility. So I'm not sure the jury is going to see it any differently than we do, which is, holy cow, if I ever get charged with a felony, please, please, please let Michael Cohen be the key witness against me.
What's your takeaway today?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I just think that this is going to continue to be... If Cohen's going to be the person that brings Trump down, I think that this is all over. I mean, I don't...
What's all over?
I think that the case is all over. I don't think that he's going to be the person that brings him down. I think that Trump is going to come out of this on top because of the political aspects of it. And I've stuck to that all day long.
Look, I think this trial is about some shady business practices that Michael Cohen did and Donald Trump did. I don't think that changes the narrative, and I don't think the people that are paying attention to it are surprised that Michael Cohen is a liar and a thief. And he worked for a guy who probably had him bend the rules a bit, right? Like, Michael Cohen seemed to be very skilled at setting up a fake account, wiring money, not getting caught doing it. This probably wasn't his first time doing it. So I don't think it changes what the jury thinks of him. I think it's helpful for him to come out and say, look, I lied. I'm not lying now, but I lied a lot in the past for Donald Trump.
Yeah, this guy ain't Mike Pence.
Right, this guy ain't Mike. What are they saying in Trump world today?
I think that they are, getting ready to, well, I think the big question is whether or not Trump himself takes the stand.
Right, that's I mean, because now it's in the defense's, it's now the defense is starting to put on their case.
Yeah, and I think he had said before he would testify in his own trial. Now folks are saying whether or not he will do that. That's going to be a big question.
But I think he's going to continue to say that he wants to testify, because then when he can't, which he probably knows he shouldn't.
The lawyers are going to...
Then he's going to be like, oh my God, I'm so innocent. I should testify because I am innocent. But my lawyers don't allow it.
Mulvaney, he's not going to take the stand, is he?
No, I don't think so. I think Ashley's right. What he'll say is, I wanted to take the stand. My lawyers told me not to. By the way, it's sound advice. So, yeah, there's an easy out here. I don't think there's any chance of him actually testifying.
Jesse, we could get a verdict next week, no?
Look, it's possible, right? I agree. I don't think Donald Trump's going to take the stand. I think he wants to, but there's a question. It was interesting today at the end of court, the defense made a motion to dismiss the charges. Probably going to be unlikely, but there was a key point of it. And Todd Blanche argued that when you look at everything the prosecution presented, there was not one mention of what the underlying crime is that Donald Trump is accused of trying to cover up. If they focus in on that, I believe could either be a hung jury. I don't know necessarily an acquittal, but I think it's a problem for the prosecution. I don't believe this is an easy case for jurors to think one way or another. I actually think this might be a hung jury, but yes, it's possible. Once you deal with closing arguments, and by the way, let me just say this quick. Pay attention to jury instructions, what the law is, what the elements are of the crime. If the jury really focuses in on that, this is going to be a little bit hard to decide one way or another. But yes, it's possible we could get a verdict once it's handed to the jury.
All right. Jesse Weber, NewsNation legal contributor. Jesse, thank you. We'll probably talk to you again later this week.
His background's really fancy.
What is the background, Jesse?
Yeah, Jesse.
It's scary podcast murder background. Sorry. It's the best
scary podcast murder background. There we go. Also of the Law and Crime Network. Jesse, thank you, sir. All right. So he was known as the Butcher of Tehran. So why send condolences? In a statement today, the State Department, writing of the former Iranian leader who died in a helicopter crash yesterday, quote, the United States expresses its official condolences for the death of the Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi. They go on to say, we reaffirm our support for the Iranian people and their struggle for human rights and fundamental freedoms. Now, so that was the statement earlier today. The State Department then asked to clarify.
We regret any loss of life. We don't want to see anyone die in a helicopter crash. But that doesn't change the reality of his record, both as a judge and as the president of Iran, the fact that he has blood on his hands.
The Butcher of Tehran. And the administration today offered condolences. What was sort of the few hours here as they were trying to navigate this one?
Yeah, I think behind the scenes you saw a lot of cleanup action happening. They released this statement, and then immediately, and I was actually emailing sources asking when we were going to hear from the president on the death of Iran's president, and they said, that statement was going to be coming soon.
Right.
Basically, we heard from John Kirby on the NSC call with reporters kind of saying, well, quote, it's a typical practice to offer your condolences, but then saying, we know there's no question he has blood on his hands, and then kind of walking it back, but we certainly, he says, regret in general the loss of life. So they're trying to walk this back a little bit in terms of what they put out there and then the criticism that they're getting for it in the sense of expressing condolences for this brutal, regime.
Hey, Mick, as a former chief of staff, I wonder what you make of the administration basically saying condolences and then having to sort of clean that up.
Yeah, as somebody screwed up. You could tell that somebody wrote that probably down a couple tiers at the State Department, and it went out, either was checked very briefly or not checked at all. this is one, Kelly's right, they wish they had this one over. And you can't come out and say, we regret any loss of life. We're in the business sometimes of taking lives from people. So, I mean, the whole thing is falling apart. It's probably just an oversight, and they're wishing that they could have it over and move on to whatever the next story is.
What do you think it was like behind the scenes at the White House yesterday, Mick, once they sort of got this news and processed it?
Yeah, I've heard all the conspiracy theories. I don't believe in that stuff. I don't believe in conspiracy theories until you see evidence. My guess is that the default position was when a helicopter crashes in fog and heavy rain in rural mountains, it's an accident. And my guess is that's how they're operating within the White House right now. Until someone comes up, I've heard stuff today on the internet and on television, radio about us and the Israelis. I don't get any of that stuff. I think this was an accident, and I think that's probably how the White House is dealing with it.
Oh, can I? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say quickly that I think that is something that to watch for in the next 24 hours, the concern from the Biden administration, watching as Iran is already trying to place the blame, whether on the U.S. or Israel. That is something that we're going to be paying attention to.
There's two things I want to say. One is we should never give condolences to terrorists, one. Yeah. And two, so I was talking to my former intelligence folks that I used to work with, and I said, will Iran ever come out and start blaming? And they said there's no way that Iran should ever acknowledge that Israel could be that close to killing their president. So for them...
So they won't go there, basically.
That's what they thought at the time. We can do conspiracy theories all day long, but it's really bad for Iran to say Israel did it or U.S. did it.
Right.
When the Israelis used the worm to disrupt Iran's nuclear program, Iran did not come out and say, "Hey, you hacked our nuclear system and you ruined our whole fun of the nuclear program." You can't admit it, or then you look. I would just say Iran's current record on flying things places is non-super. Is all I'm going to say. Whether it's drones and missiles or whether it's helicopters, thank goodness that Iran is not better at being bad.
All right, Mick, we're going to see you back here.
Blake?
Yeah, no, go for it. I'll give you the last word,
Keep in mind, this is an American helicopter, which means it predates the revolution. So it's a 40-plus-year-old helicopter in northeast Iran. It's about as far away from Israel and the rest of the Middle East as you can get. It's an extremely remote area, so other factors to take into consideration.
All right, Mick, we'll have you back here in about 30 minutes' time for Hot Mic with Mick. Catch you then, sir. That is still to come here on the Hill. But before then, Congressman Tim Burchett has told us he thinks there's a cover-up involving the government and UFOs. Now he has some new legislation out, and the congressman joins us in about 20 minutes' time. But first, on the other side of the break, you are breaking down what on this fine Monday?
I'm blowing the lid off another cover-up, which is Congress is incompetent and no, wait, everyone knows that. That's right. Everyone knows that. I'm sorry. No, but we have some interesting developments about how the election year shenanigans are going in Congress. We'll talk about that.
Something that Republicans are starting to focus on.
Yes, Republicans and how they're trying to put Democrats in a pickle.
Stirewalt breaks it down on the other side of the break. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. So House Democrats are galvanizing to defeat a bill expected to come for a vote this week to bar non-citizens from voting in Washington, D.C., local elections. Now, House Republicans are trying to pass it for a second time. So why has this issue suddenly become a focus for some Republicans? Stirewalt here to break it all down. Chris.
All right. You remember when the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, went to Mar-a-Lago and talked to Donald Trump about keeping non-citizens from voting?
Yep, like a month ago or so.
Okay, but the problem is, of course, that non-citizens can't vote in federal elections. So it's tough. It's tough to take action there if you're Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House. But where they do vote is in 16 cities. Non-citizens can vote in 16 cities across the country. California, Vermont, and Maryland. They're all California, Vermont, Maryland. And Mike Johnson and the Republicans can't do anything about that either. But what could they do something about? They could do Washington, D.C., because Washington, D.C., as we know, is not a state. Washington, D.C. is a territory. It's a federal district over which the Congress has jurisdiction. So in 2022, the city council in Washington, D.C. changed the rules to allow non-citizens to vote and joined those places like Oakland and other crunchy locations around the country that allow this to happen. And House Republicans have been spoiling for it for a while. This gives them the opportunity, this gives Republicans the opportunity, though, to really put this up the left nostril of Democrats in a year where this is a tough issue. I want you to take a listen to what Senator Ron Johnson had to say about this yesterday on the Hill Sunday.
He wants an open border, Chris. Again, he had the authority to open it up. He has the authority to close it. The reason he opened it up, I mean, I can't really explain it other than literally he wants more people flooding in that will eventually vote for Democrats.
Man, I love that necktie. Okay, so here's the deal. That message that Joe Biden is secretly bringing in a horde of migrant voters, that's not true. But the Republican base believes that hits all of, that gives them the tingles. But look at this. Look at the most recent numbers, and I think this is from Gallup. What is the most important problem facing Americans? Consistently, this is the number 2 issue in this election, right? Immigration. And it's not just with the Republican base. This is hurting Democrats with persuadables, and it's even hurting Democrats with a lot of working class Democrats. This is where you see those numbers show up with black and Hispanic, especially males. Who pays the price when there are problems with immigration and mass migration? Working class voters do. That's where Joe Biden is struggling. Okay, so it's not true. We know that. It isn't true, that there isn't such a thing that's going on. But as House Democrats are forced to make a choice here, this could be a material consideration. And I'll put it to you like this. In the Senate, Chuck Schumer is getting ready to do this to Republicans, right? That's what Chuck Schumer is getting ready to do. He's going to bring back the Langford bill that can't pass, and he's going to say, oh, vote against it again. Vote against it again. We'll put the blame on you. Well, over in the House, Mike Johnson is doing this to Democrats. I tell you all of this to say this. It's an election year, and Congress becomes even dumber than it usually is. They do even less than they usually do because it's an election year, and they're going to spend all this time and all this effort to do this, to do nothing, because neither of these things will pass.
Steyerwalt breaks it down. All right. So,
or another way to say it would be messaging bills. But
I hate that phrase. I intentionally didn't use the phrase messaging bill. I hate that phrase.
How much of this, though, yes, obviously immigration is a tough issue and an extremely tough issue for Democrats, but how much is it of it, and I said this at the time when Mike Johnson went down there to Mar-a-Lago, is if you say it 1,000 times between now and November, you get people to believe it is true. Right. And so you're just going to hear them say it and say it and say it and say it and say it, even though it's not the case. We could talk about this with Joe Biden and 9% inflation. We're going to get to that in a second, but this is the flip.
And also that was Mike Johnson needed to show Donald Trump that he was willing to help him prefigure his complaints about the next stolen election, right? So by bringing this into the narrative, you can say you're helping Trump lay the groundwork for what we know if he loses the election will be his claim that it was taken from him again. So it's part of that. So this is one, I guess I'll put it like this. Issues are either typically base issues or persuading issues. What you want is that you have alignment. For Democrats right now, the problem is their base is not in alignment on these questions. There are a lot of Democrats who do not want Joe Biden to do what is the politically needful thing for him, which is to flex hard at the border. Joe Biden, to get to persuadable voters, needs to say, I'm coming in hard, we're clamping down, we're doing it. But people like Alex Padilla from California, people like Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts, they're mad. They don't want Biden to do anything. So the base is unaligned, whereas the base currently on the Republican side is in better alignment with persuadable voters because they want to see more done.
Look, I think Mike Johnson is following the George Costanza approach. It's not a lie if you believe it. And if you keep saying it over and over, he may believe it. I think you're right on the bases where they are. I just think the problem for Joe Biden is his base, the one that got him elected, is the middle. It's the center. Right. It's how he won the Democratic primary. It's how he won the general election. I think once he starts talking to the middle, which I think he's trying to do when he goes around the country talking about all the jobs that are opening, he's not talking about inflation. He's talking about lowering costs so we can talk about it differently.
She just eye rolled you. Like, what was the eye roll for?
And I love you, Jonathan.
What was the eye roll for?
Well, I'm like all for Biden talking about the economy because he's going to lose all day long. But I do. Are we going to talk about right now the Senate doing the bill, or is that next?
We'll get to that.
Okay, but I mean, I totally agree with you, though. I mean, I think this is one. I'm wondering why I pay taxes in Washington D.C. because non-citizens can vote here. But I mean, it's a good message. It is a good message for the speaker to continue to do.
And I should just say that what Johnson tries to thread the needle on. He says it's not a problem yet. We don't have a big problem, but we shouldn't wait until
he gave the example of like, well, how many people have come in, and if only 1% vote, then that could be huge. Exactly. That's all like theoretical / straw man, right?
Well,
so we'll see.
Also, remember,
and Republicans are never going to win in the cities that non-citizens can vote in.
All right, still much more ahead here on the Hill. You were gonna jump in, but
this was one of Marjorie Taylor Greene's demands as well. So
okay,
he is keeping his base very happy.
You ready to talk about your old boss?
Sure.
Joe Manchin?
Let's go for it.
You going to be the next governor of West Virginia?
I have no idea, and I had talked to him today.
Okay, so he talked to Senator Manchin today, and we'll get to that on the other side of the break. Plus, Congressman Tim Burchett joins us here in a few moments. His new bill on UFOs. What's he trying to do? Remember, he thinks there's a cover-up here. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. So how about this question? Are Democrats about to go on the offensive on the top two issues in this election? On Thursday, Senate Democrats will bring up the failed bipartisan border bill, which initially fell to Donald Trump's opposition. It would give the Biden administration emergency powers to shut down the border, strengthen asylum requirements, and allow automatic work authorization for some asylum seekers. Now, it also comes as the White House put out a memo today blaming, quote unquote, corporate greed for inflation and trying to tie it to, quote unquote, Maganomics. What's going on here? Are you trying to flip the narrative? Are Democrats trying to flip the narrative? Is that what's happening?
Yes, they're putting.
Is that going to be successful?
I think you're going to have Republicans voting against possibly the strongest border bill there is a bunch of times. That's going to not look great for them. And the Biden team is actually going out and talking about lowering prices and talking about how corporations have raised prices, kept them up, used the recession, used the pandemic as a reason. They're going to show you what corporate profits have soared. And you're seeing people like Bob Casey, who has a bill to get rid of what we're calling shrinkflation, which is the same product.
You don't think the average person realizes I paid $5 for this in 2020 and I'm paying $8 for this now, and it has to do with inflation policies, and they're going to blame the president for right or wrong, that's just the way it works. So, like, is blaming Maganomics and corporate greed, does that cut through?
Well, I think he wants to explain to them why inflation has impacted their lives. It's not like everybody understands it. And let's keep in mind, Congress before Donald Trump got out of office, which he signed, spent somewhere around $4 trillion, which added to the inflation. Inflation is lagging. So when 2020 hit, that was the money that was spent prior to Joe Biden getting into office. He's got to explain this to the American people and explain what Democrats are doing to lower their prices.
Can you explain your way out of this, though?
That's the thing. And I think the Biden administration has a challenge in front of them because, yeah, they can try to explain to people what's happening, but they're going to go and see it for themselves. So this is the challenge that they're facing right now against what discussion he's bringing to the campaign trail. But another thing I was going to say is that we're seeing this switch, it seems like, in the Biden administration with them going on the offense compared to being on the defense for so long. And it's just like a West Wing episode I just saw. I just have to say
just like a West Wing. They're trying to out... Right? Are they trying to out-Trump Trump here?
Well, I just love that they're calling it Maganomics now when it's been Bidenomics that he wants to wrap.
Right, so they're done with the Bidenomics stuff.
And I do want to say, though, can I just talk about the Senate bill real quick?
Sure.
There's a really strong House bill as well that has some of the same issues so you're going out and messaging, and the Republicans in the House are saying my bill's stronger, and then the Senate, obviously we all know that the Senate is more reasonable, but this vote is coming up for three people: Senator Montana Tester, Pennsylvania with Bob Casey, and Ohio with Sharon Brown. They're going to vote for this bill to say they're strong on the economy or on the border. And then it's going to fail. But also, there's not going to be all Democrats that are going to vote for the bill either.
No, you're going to lose a bunch of Democrats because the bill is too strong for, I would say, 10 or 15 members in the caucus.
One more thing I just want to say real quick is that on the economy, he can try to explain it all day long, but if you're sitting in North Dakota, South Dakota right now, or whatever other state,
Pick a Dakota.
Pick a Dakota, pick West Virginia. I mean, whatever it is, speaking of West Virginia, they're not going to understand. I mean, they're just want to know what they're paying at the grocery store or what their rent is or what their insurance is.
And that's why he's trying to go out and explain.
Show the graphic real quick that came out of the White House. They're basically pinning all this, or a lot of it, on quote-unquote corporate greed and going through the different industries. Rich special interests are pushing back to protect their abuses and junk fees, including by suing the Biden-Harris administration, often with the support of Republican officials who believe in MAGAnomics. Is any of this going to sell? I mean, look, like they're trying to go on the offensive on the border, on inflation, but is that going to work?
Well, you got to do something, right?
Right.
We have 5.5 months till Election Day, and there's in a rematch presidential election, there frankly is not much that's going to happen that will change people's point of view. But these people in Washington got to do something, right? So they got to, it's like the old New Yorker cartoon, the guy, the crazy guy walking around with the beard, and he's got a sandwich board on, and it says, "The end is near. Look busy." And that's sort of what I think all of these people are trying to do, to find a message that can break through, because it's going to be very hard, almost impossible to break through in this election cycle. And it's going to get, if you think it's negative now, you just wait. By the time we get to August, it's going to be a real goat rodeo.
All right, I mentioned I was going to get to Jonathan on something. It's this. Could the Democratic Senator Joe Manchin hop into West Virginia's gubernatorial race? Now, two sources told West Virginia's Metro News that at least 20 Republicans, not Democrats, remember, Manchin's a Democrat, 20 Republicans have reached out to Senator Manchin, pressuring him to run. Now, Manchin already served as West Virginia's governor from 2005 to 2010. You are a right hand to the senator. What are you hearing?
I can tell you I heard this from the day I first started working for him to today. Being governor was the best job he ever had, but he's been friends with Steve Williams for 40 years. He endorsed him in the primary. It is true. A lot of Republicans reached out to him and encouraged him to run. I don't think he's made any decision right now. I think he's going to help Steve Williams get his campaign up and running in the general election, and we'll see where we go from there.
Hasn't made a decision means it's still on the table?
I think he hasn't made a decision on a lot of things.
Okay.
He always keeps his mind open on what can happen, and he says whatever he can do best to serve the state of West Virginia, he'll do.
Your home state.
Yeah. So I was just going to say, the important part is, how much is the Democrat candidate going to lose in the election, most likely?
I think we'll have to see.
So Donald Trump will win West Virginia by 35 or 40 points.
Okay.
How much of a delta can Manchin deliver there? I think his best showing ever was he outperformed the Democratic presidential nominee in the state by 18, 19 points. Yeah. And in a quadrennial election year, it's harder. So this would be a tough pull for Manchin no matter what. But I will say this. The Republican nominee is unpopular, right? Mm-hmm. He's the attorney general of the state. He's not well liked in his own party. And Manchin was very well liked as governor. And if you're running for governor, it doesn't have the same partisan effect, because you're not affecting the majority of the Senate.
Right.
And so they're going to have a new Republican senator and Baby Dog's father, Jim Justice. So, I don't know. Joe Manchin, you know him better than I do, but I will just say, he does not like to sit still.
Does not.
And if you run for governor of West Virginia and win, you get to fly the helicopter into the Mountaineer games in Morgantown, and that's a lot more fun than being in the Senate.
You want to keep talking about Joe Manchin, or are you good?
I will just say, when Mitt Romney was on the ballot and won by 35 points, Joe Manchin won by 25 points.
All right, there you go. All right. Meantime, Congressman Tim Burchett has told us on this show before he thinks there's a cover-up involving what the government might know about UAPs. Now, the congressman has introduced the UAP Transparency Act. It requires every head of the federal government, should it pass, to declassify all documents related to unidentified anomalous phenomena, also known as UAPs. You know them as UFOs. Congressman Tim Burchett of Tennessee joins us live. He is the chair of the UAP caucus, member of the House Oversight Committee as well. Congressman Burchett, thanks for being back with us here on the Hill. Appreciate it. Tell us why you decided to do this. Why do you feel this is needed?
Well, I'm the unelected chair. I think it's needed because you just showed the Tic Tac video taken by one of our very brave pilots. And I had one of those pilots not very long ago tell me one of these objects was 14 feet away from his canopy as he was flying. Yet our federal government, many departments tell us they don't exist. yet they are still being funded tens of millions of dollars. They issue redacted reports about UFOs. And our own Pentagon, who has not passed an audit in the history of audits, literally cannot account for over $500 billion. Now we're spending this money on something. We're $35 trillion in debt. We had every 100 days, we had another $1 trillion to our deficit. Look, it's not about little green men or flying saucers. It's what are we spending this dadgum money on? It's ridiculous.
What do you think?
Well, I think there's some members that know some things. I think that's a bunch of balloons right there. But the one prior, the Tic Tac video, if you could hear the audio of the pilots who were chasing it, I think you would think something else. And we have too many reports from too many qualified people, former admirals telling me something's under the water going 200 miles an hour, big as a football field. You know, it's too much. Just tell us what it is. We don't care. It's not going to upset my religious beliefs. I'm still going to believe Jesus died on the cross for me. It's not going to change one bit. All it's going to say is this universe is a lot bigger than we give it credit for. We're one grain of sand on a million beaches. Give us the information. Let us decide.
So you know how Washington works better than I do, Congressman. But for our audience here on NewsNation and those listening on SiriusXM, putting a bill out like you have is one thing. Getting it to the floor for a vote is another. And then getting legislation, obviously that's, that goes to the Senate needing to pass it, getting it to the president's desk, so on and so forth. Let's start with this. In the House, Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, does he view this as serious legislation? Do you think he will let this go through the process?
Well, if it wasn't, let's just see when it gets put on. I've got a commitment from him and Chairman Comer that we'll get a fair hearing and a fair process. Let them vote against it, because if they vote against it, what have they got to hide? They keep saying they don't exist. Well, give us the information then. Tell us what you're spending all these tens of millions of dollars on. That's all I want. You have a couple of power brokers in the House who've killed all this legislation in the past. They don't trust the American public. The arrogance of them is beyond belief, and they're in my own dadgum party. So let's just get it out there. Let's see what happens. I challenge them to vote against it.
You think that are we still having these encounters now, Congressman?
With whatever these objects are? Oh yeah, I get reports very, very often. I've been briefed by pilots. I've had pilots pull me off to the side. I've had former intelligence agents who have confirmed many of my suspicions about this. And the way they do it is they put it off into these corporations that have government contracts that are cost plus, and then we can't FOIA them. We can't ask for a Freedom of Information Act on them. And that's the way they do it. But I just want to know what the government has. Every alphabet agency has. I mean, we've had testimony that they have recovery units. What the heck are they recovering?
We'll leave it there. Congressman Tim Burchett, who has filed the UAP Transparency Act. We'll talk to you again soon, sir. Thank you for the time. Appreciate it. Yep, you got it. All right, meantime, over in the state of Texas, Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin made history recently, sending the oldest person ever to go to space.
1, 0. Ignition, start. And liftoff.
Inside that vessel there, 90-year-old Edward Dwight was one of the 6 on board the New Shepard rocket that launched into space and landed back on Earth over the weekend. He was training to go to space back in 1961 and would have been the first black astronaut in history. Fast forward more than 60 years later, he finally got the chance to take on the mission.
Overwhelmed, everything you can think of. And I thought I really didn't need this in my life, but now I need it in my life. This is a life-changing experience. Everybody needs to do this.
90 years old. Good on you, sir. Hope you had a blast. I just came up with that.
That was good.
That wasn't meant to be. I literally had it in my head. I was like, am I really going to say this? Yes, I'm going to say this.
Big Dad energy.
If you think that was Big Dad energy and a pun, Hot Mike with Mick is coming up on the other side of the break. Mulvaney, you out? Oh, Mulvaney's already shaking his head at me. Don't worry. We got like 3 or 4 minutes to shake our head at you on the other side of the break. What are you talking about coming up?
Whatever you want to talk about, I think we're doing a little bit of the Pope and maybe Donald Trump giving a speech.
All right, Hot Mic with Mick. Other side of the break, you're watching The Hill here on News Nation.
News Nation tonight, a Banfield exclusive,
your day,
retracing the pastor's wife's last steps. News Nation takes you through Micah Miller's final moments to where her body was found. New details never seen on television. Banfield tonight, 10/9 Central.
Thinking, all right, Mulvaney, let's start with Donald Trump's speech at the NRA over the weekend. He had a 30-second or so pause in the middle of his speech. Here's part of it. I'll get your reaction on the other side.
Together they help make America into the single greatest nation in the history of the world.
All right, so you hear a little bit of that music, and then for 34 seconds, he paused there, and then he speaks again. What happened?
So I was watching this over the weekend because I talked to some friends of mine who were actually in Dallas at the event. That music was actually there at the event. That's not put on a video by somebody like on a YouTube tape. From all intents and purposes, looks like the music came on at the wrong time, and he was just angry about it. We're also hearing that there might have been problems with the teleprompter. Why do I say all this? Because there are folks in the media who are saying, well, this is his Mitch McConnell moment. He had a brain freeze for 36 seconds and could not speak. Keeping in mind, you have to take anything about that with Donald Trump with a grain of salt. The New York Times back in 2019, as Trump gingerly walked down a wet ramp off of giving a speech, said, oh, my goodness, he can't walk anymore. We need to start talking about the 25th Amendment to replace the president because he's not mentally fit for office. So you're getting a lot of mentally fit stories today, and the bottom line seems to be from the folks who are there, he was just angry about the music coming in at the wrong time.
He put out a post, show the post. At one point, he speaks in the third person. Donald Trump doesn't freeze.
It doesn't look like he froze, though. I mean, he's shaking his head. He's mad. Yeah.
I hadn't thought of the mad part, but I guess I could see it there.
Look at that face. You don't think that's mad?
I mean, I watched the clip. It honestly, being mad wasn't the first thing that came to me, but I'll buy the story, I guess.
Blake, I've seen the mad face a lot. Ashley's right. That is the
I trust you. All right, Pope Francis. He has never been afraid of difficult, sometimes controversial issues, and last night's interview with 60 Minutes was no different. The Pope spoke on a number of topics, including his thoughts on conservative Catholics.
Conservative is one who clings to something and does not want to see beyond that. It is a suicidal attitude. Because one thing is to take tradition into account, to consider situations from the past, but quite another is to be closed up inside a dogmatic box.
All right, Mick, thoughts on the Pope's comments?
Yeah, I actually reached out to some contacts of mine in the Vatican today about this interview. I think the Pope was doing exactly what he thinks he should be doing, which is encouraging people to challenge their faith and so forth. But what he doesn't understand and the Vatican doesn't understand is how this video is going to be used and is being used. It's now being used as sort of a cudgel against conservative Roman Catholics. Oh, look, the Pope is against you. There's a very interesting exchange in this interview where the interviewer said, and Pope, by the way, you've recently given approval to blessing same-sex marriages. And he had to jump back and say, no, I can't do that. That's a sin. I could never bless that. But that's the attitude that a lot of folks are taking to these interviews that he's giving, is they're using them to promote their own sort of morality here in the United States. And I do wish the Vatican would be a little bit more careful about the interviews they let the Pope do here in this country.
All right, Mick, lastly, Target, one of the largest retailers in the country, announcing it's cutting prices on some 5,000 frequently purchased items like milk, bread, fruit, vegetables, and more. So, Mick, is this just trying to keep up with Walmart, disinflation, good news for President Biden? What do you make of it?
It could be good news, but keep in mind there's a rule in retail. There's a rule in just about every business, which is you raise prices when you can, and you cut prices when you have to. Target is under a lot of pressure. We've talked on this show recently about the earnings the difficulties that Home Depot and Lowe's have had. McDonald's reported some soft numbers this week, as did Starbucks. Walmart actually has some good numbers, But interestingly, they went out of their way to say that they think it's coming from higher-end clientele coming to Walmart for the first time or for the first time in a long time. So those would be considered underlying weaknesses. If we're over at OMB, if we're watching what the Fed is doing, we're looking at this type of data going, okay, prices may come down, but we don't want prices to come down because of a recession, and that's what I think the administration is worried about right now.
Walmart, by the way, about 25% of the groceries in this country are bought, 24% bought at Walmart. You could see the other chains there, Target at about 1.5%. I guess in a way, like at the end of the day, the election is going to be determined by the economy. You would think prices come down, gas prices come down. If they do, that could only be good for the president, maybe. I don't know.
Sure. I mean, the attitudes about the economy are going to harden very soon. We're almost done with the phase of the year in which voters are willing to consider the question. Right now, it's very bad for Joe Biden. But when expectations are low, a little improvement does a lot.
All right.
And suburban women love Target.
What?
Suburban women love Target.
that's where you're going with it?
Do you have any personal perspective on this,
I just
Kelly?
think it's a winning issue.
For
People
example,
love Target.
not you, but other suburban women.
We'll leave it there. What suburban women may or may not do with Targets in there.
Some popcorn
I'm
under
an
your
urban
seat. I don't know.
Jonathan, Ashley, thank you. Mulvaney, Hot Mike with Mick. We'll catch you tomorrow. Coming up on the other side of the break, should the 10 Commandments be displayed at schools? One state about to make that happen. Leland Vitter joins us. You're watching The Hill. All right, so before we say goodbye, here's a story that caught our eye. In the state of Louisiana, they are set to become the first state requiring all public funded schools and universities to display the 10 Commandments in every building and classroom. Now, the bill also requires the 10 Commandments be displayed to poster size in large and easy to read text. One Republican lawmaker in favor of the bill wants to give students a moral guideline, they say, saying that the 10 Commandments are, quote, simply one of many documents that display the history of our country and foundation of our legal system. But opponents are calling the displays unconstitutional. One Democrat arguing you want your kids to learn about the 10 Commandments, take them to church. Leland Vitter, host of
11
On
by
Balance.
14 poster size. You know what this got me thinking? All the posters in the break room.
Yep.
Do your dishes, clean out the fridge.
Here's the 10 Commandments.
Right, okay. No, it's very simple. There are people who do that. They they clean their dishes and they clean out the fridge, not because the poster tells them to, but because they were taught to do it at home. They were taught to be thoughtful about others. I'm not sure a poster, no matter how big, is going to change that for folks.
You got Hugh Hewitt coming up on the show?
We do. Very interesting analysis coming up on how Republicans are now starting to speak with one voice when it comes to attacking the media.